She was invited to dinner by someone else. His reaction changed everything. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us go back to our main character. The invitation arrived in the middle of the room, wrapped in crystal glasses and polite smiles. She did not even have time to react. A man in a tailored navy suit stood across from her, holding a wine glass at chest level, his tone smooth and confident as he said her name and invited her to dinner. Tonight, just the two of them. A quiet restaurant downtown. Nothing inappropriate, nothing rushed. Around them, conversations softened. People noticed. She felt it instantly, that subtle pressure, the kind that comes when eyes turn and silence stretches half a second too long. Before she could answer, a familiar presence stepped forward. He did not raise his voice. He did not smile either. He simply placed his hand lightly on the back of her chair and said, calmly but firmly, "She will not be attending." The air shifted. The man with the invitation froze, confused. A few guests exchanged looks. Someone cleared their throat. She turned her head slowly, her heart pounding, and looked up at him. He was standing close now, too close for someone who was supposed to be nothing more than a business arrangement. His expression was controlled, almost cold, but his jaw was tight, his eyes darker than usual. "What are you doing?" she whispered. He did not look at her. His gaze remained on the other man. "I am sorry," he said, voice steady, "but tonight is not available." The other man hesitated, then laughed awkwardly, assuming this was a misunderstanding. "I did not realize you were not supposed to," he replied. That does not change the answer. The invitation was withdrawn. The moment passed. The room slowly exhaled. But something else had cracked open. Minutes later, inside the quiet of the elevator, the silence was unbearable. "That was not your decision to make," she said, breaking it. He stared straight ahead, hands at his sides. "You are part of an agreement. Appearances matter." "Dinner matters now?" she asked. "Or is it control?" The elevator doors closed, sealing them inside a narrow space filled with unspoken tension. What neither of them said out loud was the truth pressing hard between them. This was not part of the contract. The contract had been clear from the beginning. No jealousy, no interference, no feelings. Their arrangement had started months earlier, in an office overlooking the city skyline, with a view worth more than most people's homes. He was a billionaire, a man whose name moved markets and decided futures. She was someone who needed help desperately, fast, and without questions. A fake relationship, a temporary solution. She would stand beside him at events, smile when required, play the role of the devoted partner so he could secure a critical business deal and silence his family's pressure to marry. In return, her financial problems would disappear. Simple, clean, professional. At least, that was the plan. But standing in that elevator, with his body angled protectively toward her, she realized something had gone wrong. He had not stepped in because of appearances. He had stepped in because the thought of her sitting across a table from another man had triggered something he could not control. And for the first time since signing that contract, she saw it clearly. This was no longer fake. She did not sleep that night. The city outside the penthouse windows stayed bright and restless, but inside, everything felt still, heavy, unresolved. She lay awake on the guest bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment again and again. The way he stepped in, the way he spoke for her, the way his voice never wavered. That had not been part of the deal. In the morning, she dressed quietly and prepared to leave before he woke. She had learned, over the past few months, how to make herself small in spaces that were not truly hers, how to move without leaving a trace. But when she reached the kitchen, he was already there. Suit jacket off, sleeves rolled up, coffee untouched. "You are leaving early," he said without turning around. "I have work," she replied. It was a habit now, using that word even though she no longer worked there, even though the contract had changed everything. He nodded once. "Sit down." It was not a request. She hesitated, then took the seat across from him at the long marble island. Sunlight cut through the glass walls, outlining the distance between them. "What happened last night cannot happen again," she said, choosing her words carefully. "You crossed a line." He finally looked at her. "You are part of my public life. That invitation put you in an impossible position." "No," she said softly. "You did." Silence followed, thick and uncomfortable. This was why she had agreed to the arrangement in the first place, because he was direct, controlled, predictable. Months ago, when she had walked into his office for the first time, she had been terrified, not of him, but of how little time she had left before everything fell apart. The eviction notice had been folded neatly in her purse. Her mother's medical bills were past due. Her phone had been ringing non-stop with numbers she did not recognize. And then there was him, a billionaire who needed a solution, not a relationship. A woman to stand beside him, smile for cameras, and silence questions from investors and family alike. No romance, he had said back then. No jealousy. No personal claims. She remembered how calm he had been while laying out the terms, as if he were discussing weather forecasts instead of her life. This is a business arrangement, he had said. Temporary. Clean. You will be compensated generously. She had signed because desperation leaves little room for pride. Back in the present, she folded her hands together. You hired me to play a role, not to make decisions for me. His jaw tightened. You knew what this involved. I knew what the contract said, she answered. Not this. He stood abruptly, pacing once before stopping in front of the windows. From this height, the city looked small, manageable, like something he could own. I cannot afford rumors, he said, or confusion. She rose as well, her voice steady now. Then do not confuse yourself. He turned sharply. You think this is about me? I think, she said, meeting his eyes, that if you were truly unaffected, you would have let me answer for myself. The words landed harder than she expected. For a moment, he said nothing. This was the first time she saw it. Not the billionaire, not the strategist, but a man who had miscalculated something he did not understand yet. Finally, he spoke. This arrangement exists because both of us needed something. Yes, she replied. And last night, you acted like you needed more. The silence returned, heavier than before. She picked up her bag and moved toward the door. We should revisit the terms, she said, before one of us forgets why this started. As the door closed behind her, he remained standing alone in the glass and steel kitchen, staring at the empty space where she had been. For the first time since the contract was signed, the rules no longer felt sufficient. And for the first time, he realized something dangerous. Losing control of the arrangement did not scare him. Losing her did. By the afternoon, the contract was back on the table. Not the symbolic one people assumed existed between them, but the actual document. Printed, structured, precise. The kind of paper that made emotions irrelevant. She arrived at his office on the 48th floor just after 3. The assistant nodded, said nothing, and closed the door behind her. The room smelled faintly of leather and coffee. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like a controlled experiment. Everything here had a purpose. Everything, except what had happened last night. He stood by the desk, jacket back on, expression neutral again. You wanted to revisit the terms, he said. Yes, she replied, because they are no longer clear. He gestured toward the conference table. Sit. They sat across from each other, the contract laid neatly between them, pages aligned with almost surgical care. This arrangement exists to protect both of us, he began. It works only if we follow the rules. She looked down at the paper. Then let us read them out loud. He paused, then nodded. She pointed to the first section. No emotional involvement. No public displays beyond what is required. So far we have complied, he said. She lifted her eyes. You rejected a dinner invitation on my behalf. For appearances, he answered quickly. She flipped the page. No interference in personal interactions unless explicitly agreed upon. Silence. That clause exists for a reason, she continued. Because without it, this stops being professional. He leaned back in his chair. You were approached publicly, by someone with connections. That could have created speculation. Speculation about what? She asked. That I am a person with choices? His jaw tightened. She went on. You hired me because I was invisible to your world. Convenient. Replaceable. That is not true, he said sharply. She did not react. Then why did you act as if I belonged to you? The words hung between them. He exhaled slowly. You are part of my public image. I am not your property, she replied. Another pause. Longer this time. He reached forward and turned the contract toward her. Then let us clarify. He picked up a pen. Addendum. Effective immediately. She watched carefully. No unilateral decisions, he read aloud as he wrote. No speaking on behalf of the other party without consent. She nodded once. And, he added, hesitating only a fraction of a second, either party may terminate the agreement at any time. Her fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the table. Without penalty? Yes, he said. Without penalty. She studied him. This was new. He never left doors open unless he was certain he did not need them. You are certain? She asked. I am, he replied. She signed her name first this time, slower, more deliberate. When he signed beneath it, the sound of the pen against paper felt louder than it should have. There, he said. Clear. She stood, gathering her bag. Clear does not mean safe. He looked up. From what? From forgetting why this started, she answered. As she walked toward the door, he spoke again. The dinner invitation. She stopped, but did not turn around. If it happens again, he said carefully, you will handle it yourself. That is all I ever wanted, she replied. The door closed softly behind her. He remained seated, staring at the contract, now heavier than before. He had written those rules to maintain control. What unsettled him was not that he had almost broken them. It was that, for the first time, he was unsure whether following them would be enough to keep her there. The following weeks moved quickly, whether she wanted them to or not. Her calendar filled with names she did not recognize, and places she had only seen online. Charity luncheons, board dinners, private receptions where every smile was measured, and every pause meant something. She learned fast. At first, she spoke only when spoken to, her hands folded neatly in front of her, her posture careful. She watched how people reacted to him, how conversations shifted the moment he entered a room, how power announced itself without sound. And slowly, she adjusted. She learned when to step half a pace behind him and when to stand beside him. She learned how to redirect a conversation without offending anyone, how to answer questions without revealing anything real. She was good at it, better than anyone expected, including him. At a fundraiser downtown, a donor questioned a recent decision he had made, his tone polite but sharp. Before he could respond, she stepped in smoothly, reframing the decision as a long-term investment in community trust. The donor nodded, satisfied. Later that night, in the car, he said quietly, "That was effective." She looked out the window. It was necessary. At a family gathering the following weekend, his aunt made a pointed comment about her background, disguised as curiosity. She met it calmly, speaking about work ethic and opportunity instead of defensiveness. The room shifted in her favor. He watched that too. What unsettled him was not how well she performed the role, it was how naturally she belonged. Still, the distance between them remained, professional, controlled. The revised contract sat quietly in a drawer, unmentioned but present. Until the evening of the gala. The event was one of the most visible of the year. Black tie, press everywhere. The kind of night where rumors could be born and buried within minutes. She stood in front of the mirror in the penthouse, adjusting the simple black dress chosen by his stylist. It fit perfectly, elegant without trying too hard. "You look appropriate," he said from behind her. She turned slightly. "That is all I am aiming for." He nodded once. The ballroom buzzed with energy when they arrived. Cameras flashed, names were called, hands were shaken. She smiled. He did not need to tell her when. Midway through the evening, as they spoke with a group of investors, she felt it before she saw it. A presence. A man approached confidently, his attention focused on her. He greeted the group, then turned to her directly. "It is good to finally meet you," he said. "I have heard quite a bit." She recognized him now, an influential partner from another firm, someone known for persistence. As the conversation drifted, he lingered. His questions became more personal, his interest more obvious. Then it happened. "I would love to continue this over dinner sometime," he said, voice light. "Perhaps tomorrow night." The moment stretched. She remembered the contract, the addendum, the words they had both signed. No unilateral decisions, no speaking on behalf of the other. She looked at him, then back at the man in front of her. Before she could respond, she felt the shift beside her. He did not step forward this time. He stayed still. The room waited. She smiled politely. "Thank you for the invitation. I will consider it." The man looked pleased. He excused himself, already confident. As soon as he was gone, she turned to him. Her expression was unreadable. "You did not stop that," she said quietly. "I did not have the right," he replied. Something in her face softened, just slightly. They continued through the evening, but the air between them had changed again. Later, on the drive home, neither spoke. She had followed the rules. And for the first time, he realized how difficult it was to watch her do exactly what he had agreed to. The role was working, the distance was holding, but control, once tested, did not return easily. And he was beginning to understand that this arrangement was changing them both, whether the contract allowed it or not. The dinner happened the next evening, not quietly, not privately. The restaurant was one of those places people went to be seen. White tablecloths, soft lighting, valet parking lined with luxury cars. The kind of room where names mattered and conversations traveled. She arrived alone. That had been intentional. She told herself it was because the revised contract allowed it, because she had the right to accept invitations without interference, because this was exactly what she had asked for. Still, as she stepped inside, she felt exposed. The host led her to a table near the center of the room. The man who had invited her stood to greet her, smiling easily, already comfortable in the attention. "You look wonderful," he said. "Thank you," she replied, taking her seat. Menus were opened, water was poured, small talk began. She tried to focus on the conversation, but her awareness kept drifting. Toward the entrance, toward the subtle shift in the room whenever someone important arrived. She told herself he would not come. He had agreed not to interfere. He had signed it. Halfway through the first course, the noise level changed. Not dramatically, just enough. The man across from her paused mid-sentence. His eyes moved past her shoulder. She felt it before she turned. He was standing a few feet away from the table. No jacket, dark shirt, calm expression that did not quite reach his eyes. The man hosting the dinner rose halfway from his chair, confused. "Is everything all right?" He nodded politely. "I apologize for the interruption." She stared up at him. "What are you doing here?" His gaze met hers, steady. "I came to correct something." She stood immediately. "You do not have the right." "I know," he said. "That is why I am speaking for myself." He turned to the other man. "This dinner should not have happened." The man frowned. "Excuse me?" "She accepted your invitation under the assumption that she was free to do so," he continued. "That assumption was incorrect." Her heart began to race. "Stop." He did not look at her. "This arrangement," he said carefully, "created confusion, and that confusion ends now." The room had gone quiet. Nearby tables pretended not to listen. No one fooled anyone. The man hosting the dinner laughed nervously. "I am not sure I understand." "She is with me," he said, then paused. "Not by contract." Her breath caught. "That part ended," he added. "I am ending it." She stepped closer to him. "You are not ending anything for me." Finally he looked at her, really looked. "I am not trying to," he said. "I am telling the truth." She searched his face for calculation, for strategy. There was none. "I was wrong to believe I could keep this controlled," he went on. "I was wrong to think distance would make this simpler." The man at the table cleared his throat. "Perhaps this is a private matter." "It is now," he replied. He reached into his pocket and removed a folded document. She recognized it instantly. The contract. He placed it gently on the table, then tore it cleanly in half. Then again. The sound was sharp, final. Gasps rippled through the room. "This ends here," he said, voice steady. "There is no agreement, no arrangement, no obligation." He turned to her, lowering his voice. "Only a choice." Her chest tightened. She looked down at the torn paper, at the people watching, at the man who had invited her, now completely silent. Then she looked back at him. "You broke every rule," she said. "Yes," he answered. "I did." "And you are prepared to lose everything that came with them?" "I already have," he said. "If you walk away." The room seemed to hold its breath. She took a step back, then another. "I am not going with you," she said quietly. He nodded once. "I know." She picked up her coat. "But I am not staying either." She walked past him, through the stunned silence, out into the night. He did not follow. Not yet. Because for the first time, control had nothing to do with what came next. And everything depended on whether she chose him when no one was watching. She walked for several blocks before she realized her hands were shaking. The night air was cool, sharp against her skin, but it did nothing to slow the rush inside her chest. Cars passed. Laughter spilled out of nearby bars. The city kept moving, indifferent to the fact that something irreversible had just happened. She stopped under a streetlight and finally let herself breathe. He had torn up the contract, publicly, not as a tactic, not as a negotiation, as an ending. Her phone vibrated in her hand, once, then again. His name filled the screen. She did not answer, not because she was angry, but because if she heard his voice right now, she was not sure she would keep walking. Across town, he stood alone in the restaurant long after she left. The staff had resumed their routines. Conversations restarted in low, cautious tones. Plates were cleared. The moment had already begun to turn into rumor. He did not care. He paid the bill without looking at it, nodded once to the manager, and stepped outside into the same night she was walking through. For the first time in years, there was no schedule waiting for him, no assistant calling, no plan for damage control. Only the certainty that he had crossed a line he could not step back over. He did not follow her because he knew this part mattered. If this was going to be real, it had to be her decision. The next morning came quietly. She returned to her apartment, the one she had kept even after moving into his penthouse, the one place that still felt like hers. She sat at the small kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee gone cold. Her mind replayed everything. The way he said her name, the way his voice changed when he stopped hiding, the way he looked when he realized he might lose her. She had agreed to the arrangement because she needed stability. She had stayed because it became easier than leaving. But she had never expected him to give up control. That was what frightened her most. Late that afternoon, there was a knock at the door. She knew it was him before she opened it. He stood in the hallway, not in a suit, not polished, not shielded by his usual distance. Just a man who had slept very little, holding himself together out of habit. "I am not here to ask you to come back," he said immediately. She folded her arms, leaning against the door frame. "Then why are you here?" "To explain," he replied. "And then to leave, if that is what you want." She hesitated, then stepped aside. He did not sit. He stood near the window, hands clasped loosely, giving her space. "I believed control was the same as safety," he said. "If everything had rules, no one could get hurt." She watched him carefully. "When you walked away last night," he continued, "I realized the rules were protecting me, not you." Silence stretched between them. "I do not want an arrangement," he said. "I do not want leverage. I do not want you to feel chosen only when it is convenient." She swallowed. "And if I say no?" He nodded. "Then I accept it, without conditions." That was the moment something shifted. Not because he was persuasive, not because he was powerful, but because he finally stopped trying to manage the outcome. She looked down at the floor, then back up at him. "I am not ready to forgive what happened," she said. "I know," he replied, "and I am not promising anything. I am not asking for promises." Another pause. "But," she added quietly, "I am willing to talk, slowly, without contracts." His shoulders eased, just slightly. "That is enough," he said. He turned toward the door, stopping once more. "Dinner," he said carefully. "Someday, when you invite me." She did not answer right away, but when he left, she did not close the door immediately either. Because for the first time, what lay between them was not an agreement. It was possibility. The fallout did not come quietly. It never did in his world. 2 days after the dinner incident, headlines began to circulate in the circles that mattered. Not public news yet, but whispered summaries passed between assistants, lawyers, and board members, who understood exactly how fragile reputations could be. He saw it first thing in the morning. Questions about instability, about judgment, about whether personal matters were interfering with leadership. By noon, his chief legal officer requested a meeting. By evening, the board wanted answers. She felt it too, even without reading the emails. The shift was subtle at first. Calls that were returned later than usual. Invitations that stopped arriving. A polite distance from people who had once been warm. When she walked into a charity planning meeting that afternoon, the room went quiet for half a second too long. Someone had talked. She excused herself early and stepped outside, the weight pressing down harder than she expected. This was the part she had not prepared for. She had agreed to play a role, not to become a liability. That night, he stood in front of a long conference table, facing men and women who had backed him for decades. "You ended a strategic arrangement publicly," one of them said flatly, "without consultation." "It was no longer an arrangement," he replied. "Do not redefine it," another voice cut in. "You humiliated a partner and destabilized confidence." He did not argue. "I take responsibility," he said, fully. A murmur ran through the room. "Then you understand the consequences," the chairwoman said. "We cannot protect you if this continues." He nodded once. "I am not asking you to." That was when it happened. Someone slid a file across the table. Photographs, emails, old documents, evidence that the relationship had begun as a contract. "That information is already circulating," the chairwoman continued. "If it becomes public, The narrative will not be kind. She will be portrayed as opportunistic. You will be portrayed as reckless. He felt something cold settle in his chest. Later that night, she found out the same way. A woman she barely knew pulled her aside at an event and spoke softly, almost kindly. "You should prepare yourself," she said. "They are framing you as a distraction, a risk." The word landed hard. Risk. She went home and sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her phone, at his unread messages. This was why she had kept distance, why she had insisted on rules. Power did not fall alone. It dragged people down with it. The next morning, she made her decision. She did not call him. She did not wait for explanations. She wrote one message. "This is becoming something I did not agree to. I do not want to be the reason you lose everything." He read it in the back of a car, surrounded by calls he was not answering. His reply came immediately. "You are not the reason." But she had already turned her phone face down. By afternoon, her name was circulating openly now. Not in headlines, but in implications. Gold digger, manipulation, calculated move. None of it was true. All of it was effective. That evening, she packed a bag. Nothing dramatic, just enough. She left the apartment key on the counter. Across town, he stood in his office, looking out at the city he had once believed he controlled. He had known there would be consequences. What he had underestimated was how quickly the world would try to sacrifice her to protect him. And that was when he understood the real test had arrived. Not whether he could win, but whether he was willing to stand between her and everything he had built, even if it meant losing it all. He moved first, not with a press release, not with lawyers, with action. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 9 the next morning. Attendance mandatory, tone severe. The kind of meeting where outcomes were decided before anyone spoke. He arrived early. When the board members filed in, they found documents already placed in front of them. Not projections, not defenses, a resignation letter. He stood at the head of the table, calm, composed, unmistakably certain. "I am stepping down as chief executive officer," he said before anyone could interrupt. Effective immediately. The room froze. "This is unnecessary," the chairwoman said sharply. "We can manage the optics." "No," he replied. "You were right about one thing. She should never pay the price for my position." He slid another document forward. A public statement. Clear, direct. It disclosed the truth. That the relationship had begun as a contract. That the decision had been his alone. That she had received no leverage, no guarantees, no promises beyond what was written. And, he added, that the contract was terminated by me without her knowledge or request. Silence followed. "You are choosing her over the company," someone said quietly. "I am choosing responsibility," he answered, for the first time. The vote was swift. By noon, the news spread. He had stepped aside voluntarily. No scandal, no negotiation, no attempt to shield himself. More importantly, he had publicly removed her from the narrative. By evening, the tone shifted. The same circles that had whispered accusations now spoke with caution. The same voices that had questioned her motives found nothing left to hold. She saw it unfold from a distance. She had taken a room at a small hotel across town. Anonymous, quiet, safe. Her phone buzzed steadily, but she ignored most of it, until one message came through. Not from him, from a reporter she recognized. The statement cleared your name. He took full responsibility. Her chest tightened. An hour later, there was a knock at her door. She did not open it immediately. When she did, he was standing there. No security, no assistant, no protection except honesty. "I resigned," he said simply. She stared at him. "Why are you here?" "To tell you in person," he replied, "before you hear it from anyone else." "You gave up everything," she said. He shook his head. "I gave up control. That is not the same thing." She looked away, struggling to steady her breath. "You did not have to do that." "I did," he said, "because this was never supposed to cost you your dignity." Silence filled the small room. "I am not asking you to come back," he continued. "I am not asking you to forgive me. I am not asking for anything." She turned toward him. "Then what are you asking?" He met her gaze. "To know that when I chose, it was not because I thought I could keep you. It was because I could not stand to lose myself." Her eyes burned. "This is my line," she said softly. "The last one." "I know," he replied. "If you cross it again, I will walk away for good." He nodded. Then I will not cross it. She took a slow breath. Stay, she said finally. For tonight. He exhaled, relief quiet but real. For the first time, there were no contracts left to protect them. Only consequences. And choice. The morning light came gently. No headlines waited outside the window. No cameras. No urgent calls demanding explanations. Just quiet, and the unfamiliar feeling of time moving without pressure. She woke first. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The small hotel room felt neutral, untouched by expectation. Then she remembered everything. The dinner, the contract, the resignation, the choice. She sat up slowly. He was awake too, standing by the window with a cup of coffee in his hands, looking out at a city that no longer belonged to him in the way it once had. You did not have to stay, she said softly. He turned. I wanted to. She nodded, accepting that answer without testing it. They did not rush the morning. There was no plan to define what came next, and that was intentional. For once, neither of them needed certainty. After breakfast, they walked. No destination, no car waiting, just streets, ordinary and unremarkable, where no one recognized him and no one cared who they were. This is strange, he admitted after a while. What is? She asked. Being unseen, he said. I used to think that was something to avoid. She smiled faintly. I spent years wishing for the opposite. They stopped at a small cafe. He ordered first, hesitating before looking back at her. Would you like to have dinner with me? He asked. Tonight, if you want. The question was careful, open. She studied his face. There was no assumption there, no entitlement. Yes, she said, I would. That evening, they sat across from each other at a quiet table near the window. No audience, no performance, just two people learning how to speak without contracts. I am not asking you to rebuild your life around mine, he said. I do not even know what mine looks like yet. She reached for her glass, thoughtful. I am not looking for rescue. I know, he replied. That is why this matters. The meal was simple. The conversation was not. They talked about fears instead of strategies, about mistakes instead of achievements, about who they had been before power and pressure taught them how to hide. Later, when they stepped outside, the night felt different than it had weeks ago. Not heavy, not sharp. Clear. He stopped walking and turned to her. There is something I need to say, he said, not because it leads anywhere, just because it is true. She waited. I care about you, he said, not because you stood beside me, not because you helped me, but because you never let me forget who I was becoming. Her eyes softened. I care about you too, she said, not because of what you gave up, but because you finally stopped asking me to disappear. They did not promise forever. They did not rush toward a future shaped by expectations. They chose the next step, together. And somewhere between a contract torn in half and a dinner invitation freely accepted, something real had taken its place. Not power, not control, but commitment, the kind that begins when no one is watching.